So in chapter 21, last week, we started with triumphal entry, and we talked about that a little bit. And I particularly pointed out kind of the interesting nature of the triumphal entry coming on the heels of the two blind men joining him on the road on the way to Jerusalem, right? Maybe as an indication of the sort of people that were a part of this triumphal entry. Incidentally, I wasn't necessarily looking for this, but I saw a thing this past week where somebody was, I guess, criticizing maybe the Bible or whatever. And they were claiming that one of the things about the triumphal entry that didn't make sense is that if this procession really happened, then surely the Romans would have put a stop to it and intervened and stepped in and all this stuff. I don't know. I'm not a historian, classically trained historian or anything like that. I try to keep up with the things that are relevant. Seems to me, though, if this is the rabble, as I described them last week, if this is the people that were blind, who probably didn't have time to go get a job and make a bunch of money and buy like fresh, clean garments before they joined the procession of Jesus into Jerusalem, if these are the people that have been following him his entire ministry, who are widowed and hungry and demon-possessed and have beaten themselves to death and thrown themselves in the fire as these people are that he's been saving, people who have had illnesses and diseases and withered hands and whatever else, I don't think that magically, because he has healed them all of a sudden and give them a meal, that all of a sudden they look like the elite. I don't think that that's a threat to people, especially the Romans. I don't think they were worried about this, which is why I think that this wasn't a concern of theirs. This is a threat, though, to the Jews, which is exactly what we saw when he goes into the temple and he starts to undermine their very system of worship and the way that they have set things up with the money changers and the pigeons and the animals and all those sorts of things. Clearly, this is something where he is usurping their authority. He's undermining their authority. And it sets the tone right here at the beginning of this last week of Jesus of what he's going to be doing for the next week. He is coming to Jerusalem, and as he is coming to Jerusalem, he is coming to set things right. And in the process, he knows that he is going to be killed, right? That is why he has come. That is why he has set his face to Jerusalem. And so there is no reason to hold back at this point, is there? There's no reason to bite your lip, to not say the things that you may have wanted to say. And by the way, he's been harsh with the Pharisees all along, but I think we see that he goes up another notch here this last week. I have this theory, or this way of talking about human relationships. We have cachet with people, right? We build up our cachet. You think about it like a piggy bank. You know, you get to know somebody and you talk with them and you build up cachet, right? You have pleasant interaction. They like you. You put like some coins in your bank. But as soon as you have an argument with them, you start to empty out that piggy bank of all those coins and you run out of your cachet pretty quick. And it's a lot easier to drain your account than it is to fill it. So, you know, you try to think about human relationships that way a little bit, right? Like you try to be pointed and careful in the way that you talk to people because you want to have peace and you want to get along with them and you want to help them. But if you're going up and just criticizing people all the time, the criticism doesn't have any effect because they don't respect you, because you're just walking around criticizing everything all the time. So it's like a way of kind of thinking about human relationships maybe. If you take that theory and apply it here to Jesus, there's no cachet that needs to be made at this point, right? There's no investment in terms of establishing long-term relationships with the Pharisees. He's not going to be at church with them every Sunday for the rest of his life or something like that, right? He is going to be killed by them at the end of the week. And so because of that, there is not the same sort of decorum or the same sort of care that you might otherwise have when you're talking with people, or that he may have shown earlier in his ministry. Because the madder they get, almost the more appropriate it is, because they will kill him. And that is what he has come to do. And so he attacks them. And he establishes that right here at the beginning by going into the temple, by overturning the money changers' tables, by driving out the pigeons. And he says, my house should be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers, right? Thieves, brigands. You are here doing what is unconscionable within the house of God. This is a place of worship to God. This is a place of honoring him, and you're using it to manipulate people and make money. And so he drives them out. And meanwhile, as he's driving out all of that stuff, says in verse 14 that the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes, and I think this is interesting, saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant. I just think that's kind of beautiful way that that's worded, right? The wonderful things that are happening, objectively wonderful, and yet they're indignant, right? They are indignant, and they said to him, do you hear what these are saying? And he said, yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babes you have prepared praise? I mean, he's not holding back at this point, right? Like, aren't you going to stop this? Do you realize what they're saying? He's like, oh, I know exactly what they're saying. And in fact, they are fulfilling the very prophecies that you tend to uphold. Yeah.
Say to one another, look, we're accomplishing nothing because the world has gone after him. And you can almost, to your point, you can almost feel that sense of jealousy or envy in the tone.
Yeah. I haven't used a basketball analogy in a while, and so I don't know that any of you care about these, but we're going to jump in. So the Lakers, right? They have LeBron James. Some people say he's the greatest basketball player of all time. Some people are indignant to that. Doesn't matter. But anyway, he has won them a championship. He's been the best player on the team. And now all of a sudden, they get a younger, better player. And objectively, LeBron is no longer the greatest player on his team. And so everybody has created all these things, especially since he was injured at the beginning of the year, about how indignant LeBron is going to be, that the franchise is no longer his, that the world is no longer his oyster, that like the Lakers refused to give him an extension in the offseason and all this stuff, right? And everybody believes that there's this problem within the locker room and with LeBron and his attitude, even though there's no actual evidence as far as I've seen, because that's exactly what we would expect, right? That somebody else has come in and taken over what is yours. And because they've taken over what's yours, you're upset. I know people who have had businesses that they sell, and as part of the agreement, they're going to stay on as like managing partners or whatever of the deal. And in the few instances of this that I know, people personally, they are almost immediately forced out of their company. Their own company that they established. The people say, we're going to bring you in, you can manage it, but that's really just for 6 months as we find our own person. And then we're going to force you out as unceremoniously as possible because this is ours now. And the feeling you have at that moment is not a very good one because here's somebody else and they've come and take. Now, in that case, you've made a lot of money because you presumably you sold your company for money. But those are the sorts of feelings that the Pharisees are having here, right? This is our temple. These are our people. We are the rabbis, and we are the ones in charge, and we have the respect and the reverence of everybody that's here, and they listen to what we say, and what we say matters. And then all of a sudden, here comes somebody else who's probably younger than a lot of them, right? Who's from the country, who's not classically trained as they are, who doesn't have the flowing robes and doesn't wear the right kind of clothes, who doesn't have the right sort of accent, right? I don't know. I imagine the people from Galilee spoke differently than the people from Jerusalem. I don't know. Maybe I'm making that up. But whatever it is, this guy's different, and everybody's going after him. And the very people that needed us, because they were the rabble, and we told them what to do, those are the very people that are abandoning us quicker than anything. And there is indignance there, and there's frustration. And they are huffing and puffing about it, and they go to Jesus. Do you not realize what they're saying? Do you not realize what they're doing? They're calling you the Messiah. Aren't you going to put a stop to it? And he said, yeah. But haven't you read the very words of God that you claim to profess? Haven't you looked in your own prophets and understood what they say? Haven't you read these verses? Don't you know what they say? Out of the mouth of infants and nursing babes, you have prepared praise. And the way that he quotes scripture back at them would just make them even more furious because these are the experts on the law. These are the ones that are the experts on the Messiah. They're the ones that know everything. And you're going to throw your words back at me? And so leaving them, Jesus went out to the city of Bethany and lodged there. I mean, he comes into Jerusalem like a whirlwind with the rabble around him. He insults them in their temple where they make their money. He goes into their business, right? And when they get upset about what's going on, he throws the words of their God and their prophets back at them. I mean, this is as direct a needling and a pointing a finger at them as you could have. And he has established what he is there to do in Jerusalem. Now, people will misunderstand it, right? They don't quite understand exactly what his purpose is because they can't believe that he has come to die on the cross. And yet that is exactly what he's leading up to. But in the process, he is thwarting their expectations of what they think is right. So he goes into the city, he stirs up trouble, and then he leaves and goes out to Bethany. Well, verse 18. In the morning, as he was returning to the city, he became hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the wayside, he went to it and found nothing on it but only leaves. And he said to it, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And the fig tree withered at once. And when the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, "How did the fig tree wither at once?" And Jesus answered them, "Truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' it will happen. And whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith." It's funny, like you get these funny little stories, right? Like here he is in the temple, chastising the Pharisees, and he's hungry. I mean, this happens because Jesus is hungry. It's morning time, he's hungry, and he sees a tree. He's like, "I'm going to go get a fig." He goes to the fig tree. He's going to eat something off the tree. There's nothing there, and he gets angry. And he curses the tree. And it withers up immediately. And, I mean, you look at the things that he's done already that we've read in the gospel, right? How many people has he healed? Like, how many miraculous things has he done? He's multiplied food. He's done all this stuff. And yet, even still, they look at the tree and they marvel. I mean, it's a different kind of power, isn't it? Because it isn't just power in the sense of he has healing power, right? And so he can heal things. Or like he has this kind of power. No. Like he can calm the storms. He can curse a tree and it withers up and dies immediately. Like these are things that violate our understanding of the world. Like this doesn't happen. Like you don't speak to a tree and it wither up. And so like the power of his words still marvel these men after 3 years or however long we estimate that they've been with him and how many miracles that they've seen. To actually see this stuff in any of these circumstances is still shocking. And they're marveled by it. And he perceives the way that they marvel. And they're like, how did it? And he gives them a lesson about faith and what you can accomplish with faith. So 2 things. One, as strange as it is that he gets mad at a tree and curses a tree, I think we understand the point, right? Jesus talks a lot about bearing fruit, that's our responsibility. This is a lesson to them about who you're supposed to be. If you're not bearing fruit, you're not doing your job. And if you're not doing your job, you're worthless. If you're in the kingdom of heaven, right, you're going to be a part of the kingdom. What do? You bear fruit. That's your job. And what is the fruit that we bear? Well, Paul outlines it for us, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, hope, kindness, faithfulness, the fruit of the Spirit. Like those are the things that we bear. Those are the things we show on a daily basis to the people we interact with. We change the world and the people around us by bearing the fruit of the Spirit. Sometimes they change for the better. Sometimes they get indignant like the Pharisees did and they get changed for the worse. But you convict people when you are different like this, right? You bear fruit. You grow the kingdom. You sow the seed of the kingdom by bearing the fruit of the kingdom, right? That's our job. And there's a consequence to not bearing that kind of fruit, to not showing this kind of love and mercy and kindness and gentleness to the world around about us, to not being these sort of people that we're supposed to be. So that's the first kind of stern warning. But the second one is a lesson about faith itself, right? Because they marvel at this. And he says, this isn't because of my power that this happened. He says that this happened because of faith. And I think we talked about this earlier with the story of faith and moving mountains, right? This idea that I used to think it was the amount of faith is what allows you to accomplish these things. And if you believe enough and have enough faith, then your prayer will be answered. Because he says, whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith, right? And so we read that and we think, okay, so this is a faith problem. This is like a math problem, and if faith equals whatever, then answered prayer equals whatever, right? So like as long as you have enough faith, you get enough answer to your prayer. I mean, that's the way my mind works, but maybe that's because although I have to stop using math since I butchered integrals and derivatives last week, so I guess I should stop with the math analogies. But, like that's the way we want to think. We want to make it a formula. We want to make it this process, but that's not really the point, is it? What's he saying? What's the lesson of faith here? Sorry, I've been railing away, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to get people to speak. Yeah.
Because a lot of times I think people just need to believe in this.
Yep.
And faith is God. Faith is Him. He's the one that performs miracles. He's the one that weathers the tree. He's the one that does this. But it's my belief in Him that causes that to happen.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get kind of muddled up in words, and we can lose sight of it. The faith is in God. Faith is in God. Faith is in Christ.
Yeah, because we think from our perspective, right? Like fundamentally, we're going to be a little bit egotistical about our worldview because that's the only thing we know. Although sometimes I think we even don't know ourselves very well, but that's the thing we know best, right? So we think about it from our perspective. So if I do this, because this is talking to me, this is the lesson I need to learn. But really the lesson is much more external, like Michael's saying, right? This is God's power that's accomplishing it. And it's our belief in Him that's going to allow this to happen. And so everything is shifted externally. Our faith in God's faithfulness, right? And the reason why that matters is because that then shifts our perspective and our values too, doesn't it? Because what is God going to do with His power? The things that are right for God to do with His power. But what's interesting is the analogy he uses of what you can accomplish with this faith is he says, if you say to this mountain, presumably the mountain of Jerusalem that's right in front of them, if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, which is judgment language on the city of Jerusalem, then it will happen, right? So meanwhile, in the midst of this fig tree, fruit-bearing sort of lesson, he uses an analogy about what your faith can accomplish, and that analogy, what your faith can accomplish, is judgment on Jerusalem, thrown into the sea, the unknown. Like the sea is always like an unknown thing in the Bible. It's this like endless thing where the monsters come out in Revelation and in Zechariah, right? Like it's like this strange thing. And it's like, that's where it's going to go. That's where it's going to happen. Be thrown into the abyss, right? Because it's not bearing the fruit that it's supposed to bear. And in the midst of all that, it's because of God and what God can accomplish. And it's our faith in Him. And so if you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. If you are asking in prayer of God and you believe in God and God's power, that's what allows your prayers to be answered. Not because of the cleverness of the words that you offered in the prayer, right? Not because you're smart enough to ask the prayer in a clever sort of way to box God into giving you what you want, right? No, it's because of God's power and God's will the prayers are answered. And so it's the shift back to God. And so then has this little interaction, and he goes back to the temple the next day. He's already gone to the temple, and he comes back in, and you can almost just, at the sight of him, he's back, right? The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, he's back. And he goes in, and the chief priests and the elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching. And they're like, we've got to put a stop to this, right? And so they're going to play their games with Jesus, right? They say, by what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? Because they want to be able to accuse him, right? They want to catch him in blasphemy. And he just looks at him, and he says, I'll ask you one question. And if you answer my question, I'll answer your question. The baptism of John, where did it come from? Was it from heaven or from man? And so then they kind of huddle up, and they're like, all right, if we say it's from heaven, then they'll get mad at us and say, why didn't you believe in John then? If we say it's from man, the crowds are going to be angry because They all think John was a prophet. We're the only ones that don't think John was a prophet. So what's the play here, fellas? How do we get out of this one? And so they're just like, well, I don't know. And he says, fine, I'm not answering your question. And of course, there's an audience, right? Like this isn't a private conversation between them and Jesus. They want to get him publicly on record with this answer. And in response, they're publicly on record shown to be fools who can't even take a stand or answer a question. And so he says, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. But then he says, let me tell you a story, though. I want you to hear a story. A man had 2 sons. And he went to the first son and said, son, go and work in the vineyard today. And he answered, I will not. But afterward he changed his mind and went. And he went to the other son and said to him, and he answered, I go, sir. But he didn't go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? And they said, the first. Which, my personality, I wouldn't have answered a single question that Jesus asked from like that moment on, right? Like I'm backing up. I'm not getting caught. But they answered the question, the first. And it's not a trick question, right? The first. And Jesus said to them, truly I say to you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes go into the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even when you saw it, you did not afterward change your minds and believe him. So he has a follow-up to their non-answer. And this is why he asked about John the Baptist, right? You don't believe in John the Baptist. Well, imagine you got 2 sons, and you say, go work in the field, and the one says, I'm not going to work in the field, but then thinks better of it and decides, I'd better go do the work my father told me to do, and they go and they work in the field. The other son says, oh, yes, father, I will work very hard in the field today. I will be a wonderful worker. And then they go and they don't work in the field. Well, who did what was right? Well, the one who actually did it. And you know what? You all said you were going to serve God. You claimed to be followers of his, but you're not working in the kingdom. Because John came, the prophet came, and he rallied you, and he told you what you were supposed to believe. And what did you do? Oh, he's not really a prophet. And the tax collectors and the prostitutes, the rabble, do you know what they did? They fell in line, and they were baptized for the remission of their sins, and they followed, and they believed, and they're here now. And you're still denying John. You still won't admit that he was a prophet. How do you think they feel at this point in time? I mean, they got their question ready. They jumped on him right away to try and scare him out of the temple. He turns the tables on him, and then he tells this story. Yeah. I used to be a big arguer. I still do sometimes when I can't help myself. I don't like it. I hate arguing. It's exhausting, but I don't know. Sometimes I can't help it. But I used to argue with people all the time. And there's nothing worse than when you get in an argument with somebody and you're confident of your stance, and they know more about the topic and have better facts than you. Because you don't want to admit that you were wrong, because you were right. I have my opinion for a reason. But you start stuttering and fuming, and you get angry, right? And you just talk louder. You talk over them, right? Not going to listen. And that's what this is, except this isn't just some petty argument about, I don't know, Jordan or LeBron, right? This is something that matters. This is your entire world. This is who I am and my position and how I'm respected and viewed by all my people. And Jesus shows up and he humiliates them. And he accuses them and he points the finger at him and says, you're not doing the will of God even though you say that you are. What's the lesson to us here? Which group are we?
Walks in and he's like, you didn't see the consequences of not doing what the Father said. Therefore, you can reject John not recognize who I am. Because you don't see the, what you have, what you control. And there's something bigger here that you don't get. And what I, just like the 2 points of the sword, one child understood I need to go do this. But whatever changed his mind, but he saw, I'm thinking, consequences of not. The other one doesn't see anything at all. There's no reason. So he just does it right. And I wonder with us sometimes, when I hear this story, do we get caught up in our own little microcosm of life and know what I can control, and what I can do, and what I this, that, and the other? I know my friend. As long as I'm politically correct with people, then I'm okay. I don't offend anybody, and I'm going to heaven. Or do we understand the consequences of not being a Christian and pursuing right?
And that's the exact scary thing that I think we should feel when we read this story. As much as we want to be on the side of the rabble, which is an ironic thing to think, right? But as much as we want to be on the side of the broken and the lame and the blind that are being healed, it is so easy for us to fall into the trap of thinking that we're on the other side. That we've been Christians for however long, that we go to church, that we're attending, and we're this good group, right? Like we're the ones that are righteous. And then the question is, but are you working in the field? And look, there's lots of ways to apply that, right? You talk about it in terms of evangelism. I don't know that all of us are called to be Paul, though, right? Are we working in the field in terms of shining our light, being a light to the world? Are we working in the field in terms of bearing the fruit of the Spirit? Are we working in the field in terms of growing and developing and sharing and doing the things that are indicative of people who are Christians, right? The empathy and the love for others and the love of God and the way that drives us into each day, right? Generosity, whatever sort of application, right? Like that's the challenge. Like that's the hard, convicting challenge of reading the Bible. Is that as you read it, our job is to look into the perfect law of liberty and see who we really are. To constantly be introspective. And the idea is not to like rob ourselves of any assurance of salvation. The idea is to drive ourselves into each day to be the best we can. Because the danger is that we can be the son that says, I'm doing it all, right? I've got it down. I'm working in the kingdom. And you never left your couch. Meanwhile, the other people who are out there who say, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to believe in God. But then they're converted and become workers in the vineyard, right? And doing what they're supposed to. Like that's the hard reality of Jesus' teachings. Is that we all need to be introspective and be willing to put ourselves in the place of the people that we don't want to be in the place of. And ask ourselves, does this apply to me? That's a hard thing to do, but hopefully it's something that we're willing to do. And maybe we look at it and we can confidently say, I'm working. I got things I need to improve on. I need to be better, but I'm trying. You know, and that's great. And so maybe this is an assuring thing, but I think we need to be soft-hearted enough to ask ourselves where we fit into this picture in this story. But here's the thing. He challenges them here, but he doesn't stop. He's got another one for him. Here, another parable. There was a master who planted a vineyard and put a fence around it and dug a wine press in it and built a tower and leased it to tenants. He goes into another country. And when the season for fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to get his fruit. And the tenants took his servants, beat one, killed another, stoned another. Again, he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did the same to them. Finally, he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and have his inheritance. And they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. When therefore the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? And they said to him, you will put those wretches to a miserable death and let out the vineyard to other tenants who will give him the fruits in their seasons. You got somebody buys a piece of land and they till it, get all the rocks out of it, clean up all the brush, and get it ready. And they say, you know what, I'm going out of town. find somebody who's willing to grow some hay on it, right? You could cut the hay. In exchange for leasing the land, I've got some horses. Just give me 20% of the hay you get over the season. So you go through the summer, they get 2, maybe even 3, 4 cuttings on the hay. It's a great year. And you got all the hay stored aside, and he's like, I need to go get that hay for my horses. Winter's coming. So he sends a servant. He sends somebody, he says, hey, can you take my truck down? Maybe they live in Florida or live in Georgia, and they're like, hey, go down to Florida, get my hay for me, right? And they go down, and they say, hey, I'm from so-and-so. I'm okay to get, 20% of the hay. And they just stone him and beat him, kick him, assault him, send him back. And this guy comes back to his boss, and he's bloodied, got a bulging head. And he's like, what happened? And he's like, I don't know. I asked for the 20% of the hay, and they did this. He's like, oh, man, here, Joe, why don't you go down there, right? And Joe's like, I don't want to go. But he goes. And he goes down. The same thing happens. And he's like, what is wrong with these guys? He's like, I'll send my son. He'll get to the bottom of this. Send the son down there. And these guys think, you know what? This is the guy's son. If we kill him, then maybe we'll get to inherit the land. It's nonsense. Doesn't make any sense. But that's what they think. So they kill the son. What do you think that guy's going to do at this point? Well, as they said, he will put those wretches to a miserable death and let out the vineyard to other tenants, right? They're going to die. That's the end of this. Maybe in modern world, none of this plays out quite like this, but let's just imagine there is no federal government. It's the Wild West, right? We're out west and this happens. What's he going to do? He's going to show up and he's going to kill them all, right? That's the rule. That's the law of the West. That's the law of the day. And this is justice, right? And so that's what they say. And so Jesus looks at him and says, if you never read in the scriptures, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruits. And the one who falls on the stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. So who are the tenants? What's the vineyard? Yeah. The vineyard is Israel. That's the land that God gave them, right? The land flowing with milk and honey. And who are the tenants? The Jews, particularly the leaders who are leasing out the land. Who are the servants who are sent? Well, the prophets, who they have beaten and thrown in pits and starved. John the Baptist, who's thrown into prison, right? And who's the son? It's Jesus. And he just tells them straight up what's going to happen. You're going to kill the son, which is obviously him in this story. And when the chief priests of the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking about them. They know exactly what's going on. And although they were seeking to arrest him, they feared the crowds because they held him to be a prophet. They want to kill him. They want to arrest him. They want to put a stop to it. And they can't. Why? Because everybody else sees what Jesus is saying and they believe to some extent. They see the power, they see the authority, and as the more Jesus talks, the more they realize, I don't think we like these Pharisees that much after all, right? I don't think we like this whole money-changing business for the pigeons that we have to sacrifice every day. I don't think that I really like the way the system is set up at all. And this guy's making an awful lot of sense, right? By the way, he cured me of my blindness and unwithered my hand. There's something to this. And the more the people rally around Jesus, the more he isolates the Pharisees. And so we get these parables, right? We get these parables of the two sons, this idea of working or not working. Then we get the idea of persecuting the son himself, right? And it's almost like there's, some scholars will argue that there's a progression to these parables, that he's telling a story and these are the bits and the way that it's going to occur, right? And so the first part of the story is Jesus is going to come and he's going to teach. And some will respond and some won't, right? But then the time is going to come where they're going to get angry about it and they're actually going to put him to death. And judgment is going to come upon those people. But then after that, there's another thing that's going to happen, and that's the parable here in chapter 22, where Jesus spoke to them again in parable, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son, and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. Again, he sent other servants, saying, tell those who were invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention, and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. The king was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. And then he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find. And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place they will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few were chosen. So it's like see this next progression. What is the parable of the wedding feast, right? Like, what is the analogy of the wedding feast? What is that teaching us? What is this analogous of? Why a wedding feast? Like, not necessarily the whole story, just the particular image of the wedding feast. Why does he choose that? Ephesians 5, right? The bridegroom, Christ is the bridegroom to the church. Like this image of being wed back to God, right? This kind of thing. As far as I know, in looking into this, the Jews never thought of the Messianic age in terms of a wedding feast. That this is not a common idea to them. They knew they were separated from God after the captivity. They had Ezekiel, and they had the temple vision of God leaving the temple and going away, and they had the prophecies about him returning. But the idea of it being a wedding and married back to God in this way is not something that was common to them. And it's a big deal that that's the image that he uses, right? Because is there any other bond that God has given us that has the same sort of power or intent behind it as a marriage, right? Two becoming one. It is a close relationship, right? It is a union that is sacred to God, right? And so it is this analogy for what God is going to do ultimately with his people. And so that's a big deal to use the wedding feast. I don't think we should lose sight of that. I mean, we're familiar with that. We read Ephesians 5 at weddings, and we talk about this stuff. We preach sermons on it. Like, we're familiar with it. But it's easy to overlook the significance of it and the nature of our relationship to God, right? That's what he chose. Like, that's a big deal. But in the midst of all this, we get the next kind of progression, right? The wedding feast, the marriage to the Lamb. We talk about the church to Jesus. That's the iteration. That's the idea here. This union back to God, all this sort of stuff. But we're kind of getting the next element in the story, isn't it? You have called, some say they're not going to go, and then they go. Some say they're going to go and don't go. Then you get the next story about the tenants, where they think that they could just take over the whole thing anyway and cast out the Son, right? And they kill Jesus. And then after the resurrection, so to speak, or the next iteration of that is the call to come in, to come to the wedding feast. And the same thing's going to happen that happened with the tenants. They're going to look at the servants and they're going to kill them and they're going to beat them and they're going to say, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And some just aren't going to come. Those that were invited just aren't going to come. The Jews, the Pharisees, whatever category you want to put them in, the people that were supposed to come aren't going to come. And some of them are going to be so angry that they're even going to put to death the servants that are inviting them in. So then who does the gospel go to? I mean, we've already gone to the riffraff of Israel. What's left? Riffraff of the world, right? Now we're going to go to the Gentiles. We're going to go get those riffraff. We're going to get the hobos and the poor and the whoever we could find, and we're going to bring them in. And they're all going to come into this wedding feast. But even then, there's another warning. It isn't just all blissful, happy at this moment. There's another warning. The wedding feast is there, and Jesus, the master's going to go, and he's going to look around. He's going to see somebody. He's going to say, friend, you didn't prepare yourself for this wedding feast the way that you were supposed to. Why didn't you put on the garments required for the feast? And that person was speechless. He's going to get thrown out into the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Lots of people write lots of things about this guy with the wedding garments and try to make allegories out of it or talk about it in different ways. I think the analogy is pretty simple, though, right? There are going to be those that think that they are in, that didn't do what was necessary to prepare themselves to be in, right? And in fact, Paul talks quite a bit in his letters and his epistles about putting on Christ. What is the garment you clothe yourself in? It is Christ himself, right? 2 Corinthians, he talks about being further clothed, right? Was that chapter 5? I mean, the whole thing, the whole image here is that we are further clothed, we are prepared, we are changed, we are washed, we are purified. And those that think that they're going to just sneak in without putting on Christ are not going to be allowed to be admitted because they have not actually put on Christ. And it goes back to what this whole thing started with on the way into Jerusalem, right? A fig tree with no figs. You got to clothe yourself with Christ, which means you bear the fruit of the Spirit, which means that you are in Christ and you are productive. And all of that then is layered through these parables of what exactly is going to happen, and he leaves them with that, right? And the one who thinks that he's in, he is thrown into the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Because he didn't really want to be there anyway, because he didn't do the work to prepare himself to come in. Yeah. 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 Grateful for Ramon. Otherwise, I'd be on the very youngest edge of those here this morning. But we got Ramon, so it's good. I feel this very personally as a millennial, I guess, in the world and the tone in which people talk. Anti-judgment sort of language, right? And as much as you try to resist those things, they affect you, right? When your peers talk a certain way, and when the world talks a certain way, and everybody talks about tolerance, and why can't we just coexist and be peaceful, right? And you want to find common ground with people, and you want to be able to get along with them, right? And so that becomes a very attractive sort of worldview to try and think in those terms. Maybe some of you that are older don't quite feel that the same way that I do. I guess the tone of our culture has changed over time. I don't know. Maybe you feel it too. Either way, whether you personally feel that pull from society or not, you can't get around how harsh Jesus is. Not all the time, but some of the time. And necessarily so. As much as he is merciful and loving and kind and gracious, as much as he gives more grace, right? There are still things you can't do. There's still a way that you have to be. You have to be fruitful. You have to clothe yourself in Christ is the language, right? You have to change. You have to be moral. And as much as we want to say, well, that's just a mistake, or that's a different perspective, or this or that, there are lines you can't cross if you want to be saved. And that's a hard reality and a hard truth for us to accept, for us to want to believe in, because we want everybody to be saved. I want everybody to be saved, right? I want the lasso of salvation to be as wide as possible. Maybe it's just selfish so that I can be included too, right? But we don't want to look at somebody and say, you're going to hell. I don't think that we like that. I don't think that that's pleasant. And yet there is still consequence. And it's necessary that there's consequence, isn't there? Because if there's no consequence, then there's no reason to be good. There's no value to goodness. There's no benefit of it. Goodness means nothing if there's no consequence to badness, right? And so there has to be a calling and there has to be something to live up to. Now, yes, Jesus will cover us with his grace and mercy and save us because none of us are worthy, right? And so then we look around and we say, well, I'm no better than this person. That may be the case, but are you trying to clothe yourself in Christ? Are you seeking him, right? Is the big part of that. And the fact is, if you're not, which I think is the real description here, right? Like, you haven't put on Christ. You tried to slip in without doing what you were supposed to do. And so you're going to go where the people are that don't love God and don't want to value him. And the fact is, as much as people want to preach tolerance or love, they don't actually really want to preach Christianity, which has tolerance and love in it for those that are pursuing righteousness. They want tolerance and love without the pursuit of righteousness. In fact, they want tolerance and love as they pursue the anti-righteousness. And that's the difference here. And so like it's not pleasant, right? Like none of us, I don't think, look at Matthew 22 and get all excited and gleeful about the guy who gets thrown into the outer darkness with the weeping and gnashing of teeth. And it's particularly poignant because he's at the wedding feast. Like, there are those that didn't even bother to come, and this guy came, and yet he's cast out. And the world will want to flip that around and say this is horrible because of all that. Look, you gotta clothe yourself in Christ, and you've got to pursue him. You can't say that you want to go to the wedding feast and then not embody the virtue that Jesus embodied, right? You can't say that you want to be a part of the kingdom and then spurn the actual value system of the kingdom. Just the nature of it, yeah.
Going down a similar line, you mentioned Jesus, how he shows a lot of compassion at times, but he can be harsh at times. And I think if we look at it objectively, it's pretty clear when he takes his various steps. The statement about prostitutes and tax collectors getting in, or coming in before the Pharisees, they understood that they had a need. He's very compassionate to people who understand that they need him and that they are flawed and that they are depraved, if you will, and need this salvation. They need, and the issue with the Pharisees, of course, is that they don't think that they need it. They think they are perfect just the way they are. And perhaps this is an issue that we can, it can maybe affect us as Christians, but I would say, to your point about the age or the entitlement and the behavior we see in the modern generation of Christianity, you guys aren't very loving or tolerant, or it's really the exact opposite. The reason we are here, the reason we are attempting to be Christians, is we understand that we are worthless, that we have a need, and that we are empty without it. And we're trying to help others see that same truth because we know their lives will be better if they are able to see it. It is, that's one of the first things I think with whenever I do hear somebody talk about Christians are just hypocritical and they think they're better. No, I just immediately push back and say that's not true at all. I know I'm worth nothing. And that's the reason why I am a Christian. Because I see the issues in my life and the difficulty I have just doing simple things that I want to do and the failures that I have to get there. And I know that happens to other people as well. So I'm trying to help them see something that will assist them in their life and pursue a goal. that's, Jesus is just making it clear, you don't want anything to do with truth and being better. And that's the reason why he's so harsh on the Pharisees. And so, as long as we approach that when we are dealing with people who are antagonistic towards Christianity, I think that will help. Because again, we do hear that kind of attack from the non-Christians quite often. That's all we say.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Well said.